we'll have time for questions and answers as well. And everyone can see my screen, I hope.
I can see it, Nathan.
Great. Alrighty, one second.
Nathan, is it possible to get a copy of the PowerPoint as well, or not really?
Yeah, I think that's something we can post on the website. We'll have the recording and this slide deck available to access on our webpage.
Okay, well, can you put that in the chat box, the link to your webpage? That way we can,
Yes, we'll actually need to have IT create a little sub page from the main RFP webpage, and then once the link is live, we can send out an update.
okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Okay. In the interest of time, we're just gonna get started. And good morning, everybody. I hope you all are doing well and pleased that we're sharing the time for an important step here in our request for proposal process. My name is Nathan Mokino. I am the Indian Education Division Director here at the New Mexico Higher Education Department. I also serve as the agency's tribal liaison. And this morning, we're here to host a pre-proposal conference for the Tribal Education Technical Assistance Centers. And it's been quite the journey to get to this point, I must say. And before I continue, this morning I'm joined by my colleagues here at the agency. If I could do a quick intro, starting with Acting Secretary Trujillo.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Like Nate was saying, this has been a long time in coming, and we're really excited to get the RFP off the ground. And so thank you all for joining us.
And Desiree. You're muted.
I thought I unmuted myself. I'm sorry. Good morning, everybody. My name is Desiree Aguilar, and I am the graduate student intern here. It's good to see all of you.
Thank you both. And, we're really excited to be in this stage of this process that began, last November, quite frankly. And here we are almost a year later, taking it step by step. And, right here today to provide an overview of the RFP and also, have some time towards the end to have a Q&A session as well. So, um, starting with a little bit of context here in terms of the state and numbers related to Indian education across early childhood, K-12, and higher ed. Thanks to our colleagues at the respective early childhood center, education and care department, and public education department, this is a little snapshot of kind of the lay of the land, if you will, with the students that are being served across education in New Mexico. And you can see, if we're doing quick math, it's over 67,000. And we're really wanting these centers to have that reach far and wide to begin building out the necessary changes and improvements with state agency partnership to really start ensuring that our students are receiving, the right education. Pathways are being developed and created to represent and reflect the communities that the students come from. And it's very much a tied process together, starting from early childhood all the way through higher education. So you can see, of course, for those that are familiar, we have our 23 tribes, nations, and pueblos in the state. New Mexico has 28 minority serving institutions as well, including 4 Native American non-tribal serving institutions in our state. Of course, there are the 4 tribal colleges as well. But we serve a very good amount of Native students across the education system in New Mexico, and these centers will very much have a role in the early childhood aspect, public education, and higher ed as well. And I want to get into a little bit about the context of how this came to be, and really, you know, the background of all of this as well. So, as mentioned, getting started in as early as November last year, our agency, you know, was able to have discussions with tribal leaders in between during the interim, and of course leading up to the government to government session, which is a convening between state leaders and tribal leadership to discuss Indian education priorities and needs. And at that fall G2G, it was announced the intention to pursue legislation, which would be House Bill 280, to establish these two technical assistance centers. And these two technical assistance centers came from the Tribal Remedy Framework, which is a framework developed by tribal leaders, education advocates, supporters, professionals, experts, to really inform, you know, what the tribal priorities and needs are to address the Yazi Martinez lawsuit. And having those conversations in the interim and kind of culminating at that point in time in December for the government to government session, our agency at HED was tasked to lead the charge, if you will, for the TACs during the legislative session in 2023. And before the legislative session, you know, we had to make sure that the language was in a good place to ensure the path forward was going to be the most ideal, and that we would, you know, have a strong piece of legislation to work with. So we worked very closely with the sponsors. Thank you to Representative Lente and Senator Shendo for carrying this through both chambers. Needless to say, it did pass unanimously and was on consent calendar in Senate, was signed by the governor and enacted into law. And part of the steps following up from that piece is our agency leading a request for proposal process, and here we are. Long story short, right? And here in the second bullet point, you can see in some kind of a glimpse of what the TACs will be focused on. And just for reference, TACs will be technical assistance centers will be referred to as TACs moving forward during this little pre-proposal conference. And you know, on top of supporting Indian education priorities and needs, working with and supporting tribal entities is a big part of it, including tribal education departments and tribal leaders, in addition to providing assistance to local education agencies and tribal colleges, higher ed institutions as well. And at there's this numbered list here towards the bottom, which also provides a little snapshot into what the essence of the TACs are going to be, you know, charged with developing and leading with state agency partnerships as well. You can see promoting Indigenous values, languages, and cultures, capacity building. That's always been a big part of the conversation, especially working with tribal education departments and for capital projects as well. Developing education policies and culturally relevant curricula and materials, to name a few. Now, here is a little straightforward slide. The RFP was issued on September 29th. And here's kind of a timeline of what we're headed towards over the next few weeks. All of this is also outlined in the request for proposal document in the sequence of events. And, you know, we certainly want to meet these dates and do everything we can to stay on track, which is our priority here, and making sure everything is as thorough and as complete and as possible. So this is a little preview of the timeline, but this is also accessible via the request for proposal document as well. And as I move to the next slide, key components. So in the request for proposal, there's 3 key things here that I want to talk about during this time. And as I navigate, I did get a new device, so please bear with me. I'm going to navigate into a separate window here to kind of go over each of these pieces. And first of which is the scope of work. The scope of work can be found in the request for proposal document that I have on screen here. And this scope of work was developed thanks to tribal leadership input, feedback, along with the Tribal Education Alliance as well. All Pueblo Council of Governors also played a big part in, determining, what the best frame of this work could be. And we appreciate all of that support.
Nate,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The screen is like the image is really small. If you could just increase it so people can see what's on the page, if you
I
don't mind.
certainly will do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, so as it were, in the key components, first piece that we're gonna lightly go over is the scope of work. And here's a little bit about the context, first paragraph. Here's also this language here, the listing that I highlighted is direct from House Bill 280, which is the legislation that we're working to meet to establish these centers, and which part of why we're carrying out a request for proposal process as well. So that bulleted list on the slideshow taken directly from this, kind of summarizing a bit of it, but this is the full extent of the responsibilities, tasks, and duties tied to the TACs. And I do want to take a moment here to look at number 7 here, which is additional responsibilities or duties related to Native American education or vocational support determined by consultation among various stakeholders. This here was a piece that we really wanted to be in place to ensure that, as we know, even looking at the last few years with the pandemic, needs have changed and evolved related to Indian education. They're not stagnant, as we all know. And this here in statute provides the TACs a pathway to be able to expand, provided there is consultation amongst the various stakeholders that are, within the Indian education realm. So 1 through 6 and 7 is any additional responsibilities that are to be determined by consultation. Continuing down here, there is some reporting with our agency at HED, or with the agency at HED. And then language about working in partnership with the state, early childhood and public ed, and Indian affairs. There is some slight encouragement about forming a consortium to further support the work of the TACs. And then one piece here is providing a plan for performance evaluation and fiscal monitoring and accountability within 45 days of award disbursement. Now, kind of continuing along here, the TACs will be tasked also with determining the types of technical assistance provided to institutions, and the partnerships the centers shall develop. Anything related that's conducive to Indian education, the partnerships, the centers are intended to be, a not a one-stop per se, but a first stop in, Indian education support, whether that's a tribe, a school district, local education agency, Native American student program. How can the proposers are to inform us, the types of assistance, the partnerships that are to be developed. Here's a little bit more of an overview of what technical assistance and partnerships are. Some examples here: tribal communities working with tribal education departments, school districts, charter schools, early childhood centers, Bureau of Indian Education schools, tribally controlled schools, public and tribal higher ed institutions, tribal governments. The actual entities are to be determined by the centers, in coordination with tribal leaders, HED, and other relevant state agencies. And of course, Indian education is a priority for every single tribe, nation, and pueblo in the state. But there again, the centers will be leading that networking, and also the agencies will be supporting the centers as the work develops and progresses. There is annual reporting as well, financial reporting on top, and accounting. And the agency will develop the form once we get close to that timeline. Now, that's the scope of work. Moving into technical specifications, there are two here. First of which is organizational experience, which we're right on top of right now. This here, an institution or the proposers are to provide a brief description of relevant corporate experience with state government and the private sector. Any experience of proposed subcontractors must be described. Thoroughly describe how the offerer has supplied expertise for similar contracts and must include the extent of their experience, expertise, and knowledge as a provider of Indian education support services. Whether that's public or private, we definitely are curious about the experience. And then second piece is a brief bios of all key personnel the offerer proposes to work with in the performance of the resulting contract. Definition of key personnel is here. And again, any real work experience, education, relevant certifications, licenses, and experience working on Indian education issues in New Mexico. And then 2, project successes and failures and related to services of tribes, nations, and pueblos, how each experience improved the offerer's services as a result. And that's the organizational experience piece here. Oops. And then getting into the meat and potatoes of the proposal, if you will, the project narrative here. This is where, as a proposer, we are requesting that the proposer explain how the center you will be submitting shall work to begin and develop and implement the following items, which are the items from House Bill 280. This, I want to take some time on this morning. This here it ties back very much so to the expertise, the lived cultural experience, the lived cultural knowledge that exists amongst the Native American professionals, Native American tribal leaders, the everything that we hold dear, near and dear as Native people that we know as second nature, this is where the proposers are to inform the state agency how best to accomplish these things. Typically, and it's a criticism we've heard and is still out there, of course. One thing that I recall from meetings that we hear and meetings that we attend is that the state is not the expert in how to look at these pieces and determine the best practices for Native students. Loud and clear. This is the opportunity where the experts, the Indigenous experts, education advocates, tribal leaders, elders, can inform the state agency, in this case, higher ed, and its partners, how to develop and make all of these things happen, right? And even looking at this first piece, culturally relevant, linguistically appropriate curriculum and instructional materials. What's the process? Career pathways for American Indian educators, and so on and so forth. The opportunity, for us as an agency to take a back seat in a small way and receive the guidance from the proposers on how to best meet these things and how the state agencies will partner with the proposer to begin accomplishing each of these pieces collectively. So there, again, all this language is straight from the bill. And a little bit about, more simply, this is what we will be looking for. An overview of the development of each of the above items, including any partnerships that are necessary or relevant. A key piece here, how will the centers conduct consultation or relationship building and engagement with tribes, nations, pueblos, and tribal leaders? Describe the governance structure of your entity, whatever that is, and the role of tribal representatives in that structure. Question to consider: how shall tribal education initiatives be prioritized? How shall those decisions be made? Number 5, how the center shall assist tribes, nations, and pueblos in navigating federal, state, local education systems and capacity for the application and spending of federal, state, and local funds. Number 6, explain and illustrate tribal engagement strategies, how the center plans to network, reach, and consistently work with the 23 tribal communities of New Mexico. And that makes up the narrative piece. Number 2, second part of the mandatory specification, center location. Any location details such as an address, and then we'll also be curious to know the tribes, nations, and pueblos near the proposed location. And regardless of location, each center will be working with 23 tribes, nations, and pueblos in New Mexico. But through statute, there will be 2 centers in geographically distinct locations in the state. Evaluation plan. This is another component. Center will be, whoever's awarded, the center will be required to provide an evaluation plan of activities within 45 days. A summary of proposed evaluation goals and metrics will be part of the narrative or the mandatory specifications here. Last but not least, letters of support. And we're asking for a minimum of 3. But of course, you're more than welcome to go beyond that. Letters of support from tribes, nations, and pueblos or organizations that work with New Mexico's tribal communities and or Native American students and educators. And I certainly open it to more than 3, but if you'd like to reach the minimum, that's certainly up to you. And that covers the mandatory specification along with organizational experience. Now getting to the third key component, which is business specifications. Here we are. First of which, letter of transmittal. There in our appendices, Appendix E, there is a form here, the letter of transmittal form, that must be completed by the proposer. And per procurement, this is a required piece of the submission when it comes time. The form must be completed and signed by the person authorized to obligate the company. Last piece here is very important. It's a straightforward form. It's in the appendices, Appendix E, and we will visit that here following this section. Campaign contribution disclosure, another form in the appendices to complete. And this must be accomplished whether or not an applicable contribution has been made. Cost response form in Appendix D. Cost shall be measured by thorough completion of this form, listing all necessary costs prior to submission. Appendix D again. Justifying each cost, evidence of need documented in the proposal. And then this last piece here is also another form, or it's actually issued by New Mexico Tax and Rev, but it's a straightforward application process to receive this determination or not. And the timeline for this, I did speak with Tax and Rev for everyone's awareness. The timeline for this is about a week. So as you're completing this section of the proposal that you will be submitting, please keep in mind this timeline when considering the deadline for submission as well. Now, here again, probably got a little bit ahead of myself when talking about the scope of work, but wanting to just reflect again about this entire process here. This was very much a joint effort from several different places and spaces across the state, tribal, and we really wanted this to be something that the buy-in was there for across all of the stakeholders that were working to support at the end of the day. And here again, House Bill 280 is a culmination of that, and now we're in the steps to make sure that implementation of this House bill goes forward as smoothly and effectively, efficiently as possible. But these are just summary points that I did talk a little bit about towards the beginning. And now, I got ahead of myself here, but more of the same with technical specifications. We talked about organizational experience. In summation, right? These are the 3 pieces tied to organizational experience. Mandatory specifications. Each of these are elaborated in detail within the request for proposal document, but this is just a nice little snapshot of the technical specifications that will be part of your submission when it comes time. And again, getting ahead of myself, this here is the business specifications, a nice snapshot of what these will be. And of course, with the request for proposal document, having that be the place where these are elaborated upon, and the necessary forms are available there as well for anyone to complete. Now, before we get to that last slide, I want to go back here and go through each of these forms within the appendices. So bear with me. C, D, E, letter of transmittal. So anyone submitting this in Appendix E, this is the form that will be submitted and completed. This piece here is where you identify the individuals authorized by the organization to contractually obligate, negotiate, and or clarify / respond to queries on behalf of the offerer. And whoever that is for your organization, your entity, your institution, you would complete this field here, whether that's their role is A, B, or C, or maybe it's one person for everything, right? And then here, subcontractors, will you be utilizing that? Utilizing subcontractors, any entities shall be used in the performance of any resulting contract, a state agency, a reseller, yes or no. And I will share, like, we also have, for anyone that's seeing this form for the first time, our Chief Procurement Officer, Cecilia Roybal, on the call. And we're getting close to the end here. But during that time for questions and answers, if it's something I can't answer related to procurement, our CPO is on here as well to assist with these questions related to any of these for procurement. So that is the letter of transmittal. And the next piece here is campaign contribution disclosure. Now, here's a little bit about the form, some definitions, and then campaign contribution disclosure, if there were any relation, contributions made, amount, the nature. This is just another form to complete as part of the package and the submission. Next piece, the cost response form. And that is a question we have received via email about the cost or the budget here for this item in particular, this RFP in particular. But here's like a guiding template, description of any of these items here related to personnel, and then non-personnel expenses for your proposed center. You know, what does that look like? And you know, this is just a guiding template for you to utilize. Now, cost year one, gross receipts, the total cost, right? And I want to talk a little bit here about the budget for this, for the RFP and the questions we've received related to that. So there's not a set budget amount here listed in this document. The reason for that is our agency understands that this is meant to be a multi-year initiative, a recurring effort, shared across the TAC, shared with the state as well. And by listing a budgeted amount within this RFP, that would limit through procurement rules, that would limit the amount of funding that could go to a established technical assistance center. And knowing that this is an effort that will need to take place beyond just the fiscal year, right? And into the and go recurring as a practice and process, we don't want to limit the funding for the TACs. I will share that based on research to our neighbors at PED on their regional education cooperatives, their budget in the state is outlined around $1 million. That is not the amount that is listed here in this document, but it is comparable to the efforts that will be related to the TACs here. And you can see, you know, year 1, year 2, 3, 4, and so on. We definitely will, we already as an agency have provided the Technical Assistance Center's budget as a recurring line item for next fiscal year. And we will be, you know, communicating with stakeholders on that support when it comes time to go through the session beginning in middle of January. And let's see, that was the cost response form and a little bit about the budget for or budget questions related to this RFP. There was one more appendix that I wanted to get through. Bear with me. Resident business or resident veterans. So that is, again, on the Tax and Revenue Department website. It is an application that will need to be made. Timeline, I did speak with someone that works on this specifically, and timeline is about a week. So please ensure that there's ample time to submit an application and have Tax and Rev review for this preference certificate, whether you are or are not, whether you do or don't meet this preference. We certainly want that to be a piece where everyone has enough time to get the review, submit an application, get the review, and receive the decision from Tax and Rev. Now a little bit about the evaluation. This is just a summary table. You can see the highlights here are where the points are allocated, and the chunk of it per se is with the mandatory specifications. The preference here is whether you meet it or not, you will be awarded this percentage of the points. There are pass fails for the letter of transmittal, the campaign contribution disclosure form. And here's a little bit about the evaluation factors as well, with some details. But we won't go too much into these this morning. And as we kind of wrap up the main beefy parts of the request for proposal, you know, this was not a single agency, single institution effort. Where we're at this point in time is a reflection of the conversations, the communications, and the initiatives to really be forward thinking. And a lot of it, and like I said, this essence, this vision was and is stemmed from the tribal remedy framework. And you know, we're here in October, closing in on November. However, you know, we want this to be a success wherever the centers are, whichever entity is selected. You know, this is the essence of this, is to further improve Indian education through various innovative ways that are really rooted in Native American communities and the beliefs and the practices that are held. And it's really a place where, like I said, we want this to be successful. and look forward to reviewing the proposals that will be submitted by November 16th. Now, I want to just highlight this contact information. Miss Cecilia Roybal is our procurement manager for this request for proposal, and I want to just highlight her as a resource that has been super helpful for me throughout all of this. It's been a learning curve, but she's our expert and someone that, you know, we can reach. I encourage you all to reach out to along, and my contact information is here as well. We did receive a question towards the beginning for anyone that missed it, is if this slideshow will be shared, and the answer is yes. We will be developing a section on our RFP webpage, posting the recorded Zoom link and this slide deck here as well. But now we're at 10:42, wanting to take a moment and you know, the time is now for questions from members of the conference. And before we jump into that, I want to just turn to Acting Secretary Trujillo if there was anything that you wanted to add, anything that I may have missed before we jump to questions.
Thank you, Nate. You were very thorough, but I will defer so we have more time for questions.
Great. Any questions from our guests this morning? And I'm also checking the chat, not seeing anything. But as we are kind of going through the Q&A session, if I could just ask, I have a small ask from everyone. In the chat, just enter name, contact info, and the organization, entity, institution that you're representing here on this call. Just for attendance as all.
Okay, so I have a few questions. Is it okay to start, Nathan?
Yes.
Okay, so timeline. So my past experience working with the state, all deliverables and monies have to be spent down by June 30th. So it makes it very difficult for institutions like ours to set this up inside the institution and then spend down costs. So there's a lot of a lot of pieces that have to be addressed. So if it has, and what is the total amount? So I know that 25% goes to the department, to your department. I need an exact number for 1 or 2 centers, and this is the only way that the University of New Mexico will allow us to submit these proposals. We have to have a very concrete idea because of all of our you know, the way we work salary and the institute work.
Got it. So first question with the timeline. We are aware that, you know, it is about 6 months to once the funding is available to you know, have this be a process where the work can begin and expenditures can take place, things to that effect. We're aware of that timeline, and for this proposal for the guests and the recording, we're going to work to ensure that there's not any constraints or hiccups, while we're also making sure that we're following the expenditure timeline on the state side as well. As mentioned, we want the centers to be successful, feel supported, and the budget timeline is a big part of that. We know that, and at our agency, we always do what we can to support, if it's institutions with their grants, if it's organizations with the expenditures, and that will be no different during this process as well. Of course, doing everything we can in the right channels and avenues as well. In terms of amount, we will need to follow up with you on that piece. But I appreciate you for really sharing us the process for your institution at UNM. And that gives us, you know, the right kind of, how would I say, the pathways to really start thinking about the response. And you know, again, kind of highlighting the slight apples to oranges comparison with the regional education cooperatives, and their budget is $1 million. You know, that's something to think about and consider based on research. But I also want to chime in, or have our procurement officer chime in if there's anything that she has to add with regarding your question. So Cecilia, are you there? And we have a question about the budgeted amount.
So Carmela, I was a little bit interested in what you meant by the 25%.
So in previous meetings, the amount that was allotted by the legislature. So you have a sum, and then from that sum, it's to be divided into 2 centers, and a percentage was mentioned. So we followed this legislation throughout this entire process. And we heard that a certain percentage of that is going to go to the higher education department. So
Oh,
we really have to estimate so that we can go ahead, Nathan.
Yes, okay, thank you for that context. And I can answer now with that context, I can answer this question. The legislation that was passed did not have appropriation language. That language was struck during the House Appropriations Committee. And with that being the case, we're going to be conducting or developing and finalizing a MOU for a transfer of funds between Indian Affairs and the Higher Education Department for the TACs. And we'll still need to follow up with the response on the exact, I know you're asking for the exact amount. But with regards to the statute and the bill itself, the appropriation language was struck. So that 25%, that's not in the bill anymore.
And what is the negotiated? Is there a new negotiated rate? What will that rate look like? And the reason is it's gonna also, and is it just the basic state FNA? The 10 or 20%? University has a negotiated rate, all universities do. So I'm just trying to think through, like, if there was a special negotiation for tribal education, or if there was something else in there.
In statute, there's not, well, I should be specific. House Bill 280, there's not any mention of rates or percentages or things to that effect. I may be misunderstanding your question, but as it pertains to the bill that we're following for the TACs, there's not any percentages or rates that have been identified. And we're going to be capturing this question. So this is a place of follow-up for us as an agency. And I don't know if Cecilia, if you had any follow-up pertaining to the second part of that question.
so I know that the budget amount is a question that everybody has, and it's really hard for us to answer this because we don't want to be restricted to that amount, especially because we want to be able to use this RFP for the next 4 years. If we were to put an amount in the RFP, we would be restricted to that amount. So meaning if we were to get funding for this next fiscal year, which is our goal, then we would have to go out for RFP again. And you guys already know how long this has taken. So what we can say is that based on the research that Nathan has done, we are thinking more about $1 million per center. And that's with the history of what it has, with what other entities have to start up. $1 million to start is basically what we're going to say. Per center.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Mm-hmm.
So spending $1 million in 5 months to stand up a center, it may be very difficult for some of the institutes, even the University of New Mexico. So since it's for 1 year, so we're not able to break it up into multiple or to carry over. So our experience is returning funds. So the chances of by the time December comes and the university is able to stand up with its own internal infrastructure, it won't be ready to actually begin expenditures till probably March or April. It does take over 2 months to stand up a grant in our system. So spending $1 million in that period of time, minus whatever the FNA with the state, about 20%. So about 800,000 is what we would have to disseminate or spend within that time frame. So that okay, thank you for this, puts things in perspective. But we do run the risk of returning funding, standing up a center in 5 months.
For the first year, yeah. And I think we understand that. Nathan, do you guys understand that?
Yes.
With the
yes.
timeline, it's going to be difficult to spend that much in the first year. But then we're also hoping for funding for the next, 3 years at least, and so on.
Thank you all for that clarification. I really appreciate it.
And with the timeline and where we're at presently, certainly wanting to again reiterate that we've heard from our counterparts, not to name names, but the expenditure process on that side is something that we certainly want to learn from. And again, that looks for us as an agency, that's the part where we'll need to be innovative and creative on how we support and alleviate those concerns that you outlined, Dr. C, and the situation scenario for your institution, because that's one institution, and we want to again ensure that there's the support around the shortened timeline for the first year, and then wherever these centers are, having that support regardless, and making sure that the money does not revert, because at the end of the day, we want this to be a success, and we as an agency will be innovative and supportive in those ways.
Yeah, one of the things, Dr. Roybal, that we can look into after this, and we will, you should also know as part of this is any question or comment that gets brought up, we will try to answer it here, but we also have to give you a copy of it with an answer. And so we can include what I'm going to say in that answer, which is we can follow up by asking our legal counsel and our institutional finance what it means for us to be able to be in a position as an agency to give extensions, right? So understanding that there is like that 5 month spending, I understand is a very truncated time. But we don't want to give any, how do I say, answers we're not sure of right now. So what I will do is I will follow up and, even ask partners at DFA and elsewhere to see what options we have. Because as Nathan was saying, is that we want these to be successful. One of the issues that we're trying to address, to support tribal education is essentially these issues of procurement, right? And how it makes it so difficult to do things. And so in terms of standing these up, perhaps we can start coming to some of those solutions so that they can be in place as the centers get stood up. I hope that made sense.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the clarification and putting it all in perspective. I do know that there is ways for us to address this as a grant so that 50% is in, and then the rest we're able to. So there's a lot of different ways to maneuver in the institute, but it's still a heavy burden for any institute or any center to. So we'll talk about it internally. So my partners are here online, and we'll think through creatively how we can work together to take care and submit something. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dr. Roybal. Any additional questions that the group has? And as mentioned, these are being captured, and we'll have written responses for those that have submitted the acknowledgement of receipt form. And this is all recorded as well. Yes, Anya?
Yeah, hi, good morning, Nathan and Deputy Secretary. Thank you for this meeting. I just have a quick question regarding the evaluation committee mentioned in the RFP. And we had talked previously, and the Tribal Education Alliance submitted a request that there be tribal representation. And then I'm aware that the All Pueblo Council of Governors actually adopted a formal resolution nominating the APCG chairman to the evaluation committee. So I was just wondering what the plans were regarding that committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anya. So we're developing, number one, we have received the resolution from Director Taryn Villa. We are preparing as an agency letters requesting nomination. Let me backtrack. Letters accepting All Pueblo Council of Governor Chairman Mitchell to serve on the evaluation committee. So that's in the works. Secondly, we're also preparing nomination request letters from the Navajo Nation, Jicarilla Apache Tribe Nation, and Mescalero Apache Tribe as well for their representation on the evaluation committee. And because this is a shared agency effort and initiative, we're looking at myself to serve on the committee along with Assistant Secretaries Juanico and Sneddy, both from Acoma and Navajo Nation respectively, and I myself from San Felipe and Santo Domingo. So there will be 3 state partners and let me see, four tribal representations, representatives as well on the committee. Thumbs up. Okay. Last couple minutes for any questions. Some folks have jumped off. You know, just last couple minutes for any questions here. We do have a lot to follow up on as an agency, and certainly appreciate everyone's initiative and time to be here. But if there are no other questions here, again, this Zoom is being recorded, will be posted on our agency website, and you know, once the link is live, it will be shared with you all as the guests, and also just publicly available for anyone that wasn't able to attend. That being said, thank you for your time, for your questions, for your attention. And we're going along this process. At the end of the day, you know, we want this to be a successful effort on our part, and we want to really do everything we can to alleviate the timeline concerns while also supporting, at the end of the day, Indian education improvements that was founded in Tribal Remedy Framework. So we do have lots to follow up on as an agency, but nonetheless, just the same, appreciate your time and attention this morning.
And as somebody who has filled out these kinds of grant applications from the faculty perspective, I just want to also send everybody off with good writing wishes. You know, this is also the part where there's all of the details, but it's also the imagination part of it too. And so we're really excited to see the proposals.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you a good day and best of luck with your proposals.
Bye.